Every time you explain yourself, you lower your status. Most people believe explanations create understanding. In reality, they create exposure. The moment you start justifying your actions, you signal something subtle but powerful. You still need approval. Power disappears the moment approval becomes your goal. Manipulators understand this better than you do. They don't attack you directly, they simply question you. Then they watch you talk. The more you explain, the more control they gain. Comment this once before continuing. I move with quiet authority. People are conditioned to explain themselves. From childhood, authority figures demanded reasons. Teachers asked why homework wasn't finished. Parents demanded explanations for every decision. Over time, the brain builds a reflex. When questioned, the mind rushes to defend itself. This is called the validation reflex. The brain believes explanation will restore social harmony. But power dynamics don't work that way. In real power structures, explanations signal uncertainty. High-status individuals assume authority over their decisions. Low-status individuals justify them. When someone challenges your choice, and you immediately start explaining, you unconsciously shift positions. You move from decision-maker to defendant, and defendants are always weaker than judges. Watch what happens in a simple situation. Someone asks why you made a decision. You start explaining. You add context, you give background, you offer logic. Then the other person asks another question. Suddenly, you're deeper inside the conversation than you intended. Now, you're defending details you never planned to reveal. This is not discussion. This is frame control. The person asking the questions controls the psychological frame. Every answer places you deeper inside their frame. Now you are reacting instead of leading. Most people don't even notice when this shift happens, but experienced manipulators notice immediately. They keep asking questions until your authority dissolves. Explaining also exposes your internal structure. When you describe your reasoning, you reveal your priorities, your doubts, and your pressure points. Psychologically, this is called information asymmetry. In any power dynamic, the person who reveals less has more leverage. When you explain everything, you reverse that equation. Suddenly, the other person understands how you think. They learn what matters to you. They discover what you're afraid of losing. Once someone understands those things, influencing you becomes easier. This is why powerful figures reveal very little about their internal process. They speak in decisions, not explanations. They deliver direction without exposing their psychology. Silence disrupts this entire system. Silence removes the information manipulators depend on. Most people fear silence because it creates social tension. When a conversation pauses, the brain experiences discomfort. Humans naturally try to fill that gap. They rush to speak, clarify, and soften the moment. But the person who controls silence controls the interaction. When you pause instead of explaining, something interesting happens. The other person begins to overthink. They start interpreting your quiet as certainty. They wonder whether pushing further will damage their position. Silence becomes psychological pressure. Comment this in the middle of the video if you understand the principle. Silence is control. This mechanism is why confident leaders often speak less than everyone else in the room. Their words are brief and final. They deliver conclusions rather than explanations. This approach activates a powerful mental shortcut inside the human brain. People associate certainty with competence. When someone speaks calmly and briefly, others assume the decision has already been evaluated deeply. The brain interprets clarity as authority. Machiavelli understood this psychological pattern centuries ago. He wrote that everyone sees what you appear to be, but very few experience what you really are. The appearance of certainty shapes how people treat you long before they analyze your logic. When you speak with calm precision instead of endless explanation, people interpret it as control. Consider what happens when someone challenges you publicly. The instinct is to defend yourself. You begin explaining the situation, the context, and the reasoning behind your decision. But the moment you start defending, you have already accepted the accusation frame. This is called defensive positioning. In psychology, the person defending automatically loses status because they are responding rather than directing. The stronger move is different. A controlled response breaks the frame instead of feeding it. When someone questions your decision, you acknowledge it briefly and move forward. A simple statement like "that decision stands" closes the frame without feeding the conflict. Power comes from rejecting frames, not debating inside them. Many people worry that refusing to explain will make them appear arrogant or dismissive. In reality, the opposite occurs when the approach is controlled. Calm certainty signals emotional discipline. Emotional discipline is the trait people associate with authority figures. When you stop chasing understanding, people start observing your behavior more closely. They look for results instead of explanations. This shifts the entire conversation from talk to performance. Results replace arguments. When outcomes are visible, explanations become unnecessary. Strategic communicators understand three replacements for explanation. First is clarity. Speak in direct statements rather than layered justifications. Second is silence. Allow pauses to exist without rushing to fill them. Third is results. Let outcomes demonstrate the logic behind your decisions. These three elements create what psychologists call outcome authority. Humans ultimately trust visible results more than verbal reasoning. When someone repeatedly produces results, their decisions face less resistance over time. The brain begins to associate that person with reliability and control. This transformation requires abandoning the old identity most people carry. The explainer identity seeks validation through understanding. It believes respect is earned by convincing others, but convincing others places your authority in their hands. The strategic identity works differently. It communicates direction and allows actions to validate that direction later. One identity reacts, the other operates. There is also a deeper psychological benefit to limiting explanations. Emotional independence grows stronger. When you no longer feel pressure to justify every action, your decisions become more deliberate. You think carefully before acting, because you know the decision will stand on its own. This builds internal stability. People sense this stability quickly. Human perception constantly scans for emotional signals. Nervous energy invites challenge. Calm certainty discourages it. A disciplined communicator understands when explanation is useful and when it is destructive. In learning environments, explanations build understanding. In power dynamics, explanations often dissolve authority. The context determines the correct response. Strategic individuals recognize the difference instantly. When a decision requires leadership, they communicate with precision rather than persuasion. When clarity is needed for collaboration, they explain without surrendering authority. Notice the shift that happens when you apply this consistently. Conversations become shorter. Debates disappear faster. People stop questioning every move because questioning produces little response. Your presence begins to feel different. Instead of reacting emotionally, you observe interactions carefully. You answer only what matters. You reveal only what strengthens your position. This creates psychological distance between you and the need for approval. That distance becomes your advantage. If you are building a disciplined mind and learning how psychological power actually works, subscribe to Ilu Codex. This channel exists for people who prefer precision over noise and strategy over endless motivation. Return to the original idea. Every time you explain yourself unnecessarily, you lower your status. Not because explanations are wrong, but because they signal dependency on approval. Manipulators rely on that dependency. They question, provoke, and observe until the other person exposes their entire reasoning. The moment you remove that habit, their leverage disappears. The shift is simple but powerful. Speak clearly, reveal less. Let silence carry weight. Let results answer questions that words cannot. Comment this as the final commitment. If this mindset makes sense to you, I don't explain, I execute. The old identity reacts to every challenge. The new identity observes, decides, and moves forward without needing permission. When people realize you no longer rush to justify your actions, something changes in their perception. Questions become fewer. Respect becomes quieter but stronger. Power does not grow through explanation. Power grows through controlled decisions and disciplined communication. The moment you stop explaining everything is the moment people begin to understand that your decisions are not invitations for debate. They are directions.